justice people. It's time to get things started.
Calling all my people, set it off. Work together, set it off. Not one step back, set it off. Justice forever, set it off. Talk about Sankofa, set it off. Go back and get it, set it off. Free everybody, set it off. Don't you forget it, set it off. Set it off for justice, set it off. Set it off for peace, set it off. 'Cause love needs you, set it off. And love needs me, set it off. Power to the people, set it off. We're sick and tired, set it off. You're gonna hear us, set it off. Fuel the fire, set it off. Time for things to change, set it off. Everybody knows, set it off. Time for hate to die, set it off. Time for love to grow. Set it off for the broken, set it off for the poor. Let's set it off, set it off. The people have the power, love will lead the way. We'll set it off, set it off. Speaking truth to power, stand for truth and justice. Set it off, set it off. Speaking truth to power, stand for truth and justice. Set it off.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Freedom Church of the Poor service for August 20th. My name is Sierra Taylor, and I'm a cultural organizer and educator with the Cairo Center for Religions, Rights, and Social Justice. Thank you for joining us in our third service of the Black August series with the Freedom Church, honoring the patron saints and martyrs of our revolutionary social movement. The mission of the Freedom Church of the Poor is to be a spiritual home for movement leaders and a place to help nurture moral leadership for the struggle to end poverty, systemic racism, ecological devastation, militarism, and the false moral narrative of Christian nationalism. We reject the religion of empire, which blames the poor for their poverty, pits the poor and dispossessed people against each other, and promotes the false narrative that poverty cannot be ended, only alleviated through charity. The Freedom Church of the Poor began meeting in March of 2020, just as the COVID-19 pandemic was breaking out in the United States. The Freedom Church of the Poor comes together in these times out of necessity to help end a system that is killing us. We are a loose network of workers, poor folks, pastors, organizers, thinkers, and fighters. We are bound together by our conviction that the world does not have to be this way and that this is not as good as it gets, because God created abundance for all, not just for a few. We are interfaith, interspiritual, and non-religious, and come from every region of the country. We welcome all who wish to be a part of this movement and all victims of empire. I am now going to pass it over to my brother, Reverend Niall Fort of the Dream Defenders Sunday School. Reverend Niall is a minister, organizer, and scholar. He is currently an assistant professor of African American and African Diaspora Studies at Columbia University and a faith-based organizer with the Dream Defenders.
Thank you, Sierra, for getting us all here together for this wonderful, sweet spirit that you've helped invite into this space. Hi, everyone. I can see some folks' faces. I can't see others, but I'm sure they're beautiful and shining and smiling. I'm so happy to be here with you all. Just for a minute or two, I'm going to talk a little bit about what Black August is. We don't want to assume that everyone here knows, so we want to share a little bit, and then we want to keep defining what that means over time. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about Jubilee. So Black August is a tradition, a long tradition that originated in California's prison system in the 1970s, particularly after the deaths of Jonathan and George Jackson, and a lot of other incarcerated Black people who sought for freedom. This month has been used to lift up organizations and revolutionaries, activists, and organizers who've been battling with the U.S. state, those specifically who are incarcerated, those who have been assassinated, those who have been exiled by this country, which Dr. King called the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. This year, the Cairo Center, Donkey Saddle Projects, Highlander Center, and the Dream Defender Sunday School will be commemorating this month with the Freedom Church of the Poor sessions. It's grounded in the experience of the Watts Uprising, the 1968 Poor People's Campaign with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the National Welfare Rights Organization, the original Rainbow Coalition. We're also honoring Black veterans in the movement throughout history, the March on Washington, the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, and so much more. The mission of the Freedom Church of the Poor is to be a spiritual home. We know there's so many political homes, but the beautiful thing about this space is that we're also trying to provide and co-create a spiritual home, because we know that social movements not only change material conditions, but they grow our souls, as Grace Lee Boggs once said. So this is a spiritual home for movement leaders, for everyday folks, people who are asking questions, people who are trying to provide answers, and a place to help nurture real moral leadership for the struggle to end poverty, systemic racism, ecological devastation, militarism, and the false moral narrative of Christian nationalism. The schedule for the series is on Sundays from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. So y'all must really love church, and you must really love freedom if you are here on a beautiful day like today. So we appreciate you for coming. It began on August 6th, and it will be running through September 3rd. So that's about Black August and a little bit about how Freedom Church of the Poor is pushing that tradition. And just a brief word about Jubilee. Characterized by biblical stories and historical and contemporary examples in which every need is supplied. I want to go ahead and let that sit. Every single need is supplied. It's almost hard to imagine that under capitalism sometimes, but Black August is going to help us imagine it. Think about the Garden of Eden or manna in the wilderness, the practice of Jubilee in the early Christian communities. This theme describes anti-poverty programs that ran throughout the Bible. The season of Jubilee parallels Pentecost, when God's Spirit was poured out on a multiracial movement of Jesus followers, as well as the season just after, often known as Ordinary Time. If you don't know about these words, I don't know about half of them. It's okay. We're here together. We're learning together. These kind of biblical stories provide not just our moral justification that everybody has a right to live and to flourish, but also how that reality can be achieved, which ought to be ordinary in all of our lives and in our world. So I want to pass it off to Ricky Rodriguez of the We Cry Justice Artist Collective, who's going to talk a little bit about altars and how we're framing this session.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen now about an offering that we designed for this session to create an altar to honor the martyrs of just a few of the martyrs of our movement today. So 1 second. So what I'm going to do for this session, I usually speak through visual imagery. I designed an altar space to kind of reflect on our movement history, for people's personal lives and political lives, our spiritual nurturing. And so we decided to create kind of an altar that kind of honors the four directions in Mexica, or indigenous thought, where my family's from. We create altars that honor the four elements and also the four directions: north, south, east, and west. And in each of those directions, we have symbols. For example, as you can see here, candles, flowers. In the middle, I'm going to paint libations, water in the center, and feathers for a symbol of air. And as you can see, I named the eyes of people like Martin Luther King, Ella Baker, George Jackson, Martina Davis, A. Philip Randolph, Ayad al-Halak, who was murdered by the Israeli border police, and Nanny of the Maroons from Jamaica. These are just 7 pairs of eyes of symbols of people, of revolutionary leaders throughout history. And there's so many more. And so while we continue this session today, I'm going to color this and share with you all as an offering what comes up by the end of the session. So yeah, that's my visual artist offering today.
You're amazing. Thank you, Ricky. It's such a beautiful experience to be able to have a space where you're able to commune with people across, time and distance. And Ricky has been a comrade who's been a part of our network for some time. If you've been checking out this Black August series, his grandfather, the revolutionary poet, organizer, and leader from Watts, Louis Rodriguez, was on a couple of sessions ago for our first service about the Watts uprising. And the eyes that Ricky has illustrated in this virtual altar are inspired by the work of eyewitness Siwan in Palestine, in the old city of the neighborhood of Siwan. And one of the folks that I met on a recent delegation that Reverend Nile helped co-lead with the Friends of Sabile North America, one of my dear comrades, who I refer to as my roommate, an incredible revolutionary, Olivia Buckley, is going to start us off with a sacred text tonight. Olivia, she is a community organizer based in Washington, D.C., working primarily at the intersections of housing justice, climate change, and public safety. And so I'm going to pass it off to Olivia. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Sierra, and thank you to everyone who's here. It's so wonderful to be with you. Ricky, this altar is beautiful and such a powerful representation of the ancestors that we get to lean on every day. I appreciate you incorporating Nanny, Queen of the Maroons, who is my personal contribution to the altar as a deep source of strength for me. My family is Jamaican on my dad's side, and Queen Nanny led the revolution in the Blue Mountains. And she was a fierce, both spiritual leader in her Obeah tradition, but she also physically resisted and led the revolution there. So I'm deeply grateful to her legacy. So I'll be reading the poem Catch the Fire by Sonia Sanchez, who is also an incredible, not ancestor yet, but thankfully, but an incredible leader in the movement and revolutionary. Catch the fire. Sometimes I wonder what to say to you now in the soft afternoon air as you hold us all in a single death. I say, where is your fire? I say, where is your fire? You gotta find it and pass it on. You gotta find it and pass it on. From you to me, from me to her, from her to him, from the son to the father, from the brother to the sister, from the daughter to the mother, from the mother to the child. Where is your fire? I say, where is your fire? Can't you smell it coming out of our past? The fire of living, not dying. The fire of loving, not killing. The fire of blackness, not gangster shadows. Where is our beautiful fire that gave light to the world? The fire of pyramids, the fire that burned through the holds of slave ships and made us breathe. The fire that made guts into chitterlings, the fire that took rhythms and made jazz. The fire of sit-ins and marches that made us jump boundaries and barriers. The fire that took street talk sounds and made righteous Imhotep raps. Where is your fire? The torch of life, full of Nzinga and Nat Turner and Garvey and Du Bois and Fannie Lou Hamer and Martin and Malcolm and Mandela. Sister, sister, brother, brother, come, come. Catch your fire, don't kill. Hold your fire, don't kill. Learn your fire, don't kill. Be the fire, don't kill. Catch the fire and burn with eyes that see our souls walking, singing, building, laughing, learning, loving, teaching, being. Hey, brother, brother, sister, sister, here is my hand. Catch the fire and live, 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 live.
Whew. Yes, thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Sister Sonia. I'm going to pass it over to Reverend Niall to read our next sacred text.
Thank you, Olivia. I'm going to read it. I thought maybe we were going to put it up on the screen, but I can read it on my own, or we can put it up. The Gospel of Matthew, the 26th chapter, verses 17 through 30 reads like this. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Where do you want us to make preparations for you to eat the Passover?" He replied, "Go into the city to a certain man and tell him, the teacher says, my appointed time is near. I am going to celebrate the Passover with my disciples at your house." So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them and prepared the Passover. When evening came, Jesus was reclining at the table with the 12. And while they were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." Let me go over to my screen. They were very sad and began to say to him one after the other, "Surely you don't mean me, Lord." Jesus replied, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him, but woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born." Then Judas, the one who would betray him, said, "Surely you don't mean me, Rabbi." Jesus answered, "You have said so." While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take, eat, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink from this fruit of the vine from now on until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives.
Thank you, Reverend Niall. And like you said, we're all coming together in this space that is Freedom Church of the Poor, this Black August Spirit series from, different perspectives, different backgrounds. It's often helpful for me to have a little bit of context when I'm engaging with sacred text of any sort. And so Reverend Jess of Freedom Church of the Poor, who couldn't be with us this evening, thought of this piece from Reverend Liz Theo Harris our executive director of the Cairo Center, and her book, Always With Us, that provides a little bit of context to this scene of, this anointing of Jesus and his final meal. The unnamed woman's anointing of Jesus has multiple meanings. It both anoints him as King, Christ, Messiah, and prepares his body for burial. In both these means, her individual act of care is often greater than her present context. His preparation for burial was significant, given what we know about the denial of burial for the crucified. Does she know that he will receive a punishment of a revolutionary? Is her action one of civil disobedience, much like Jesus' tax evasions and actions against the empire? Is this why her action makes the disciples so uneasy? She associates herself with a revolutionary and anoints him for burial before he is dead in an effort to take away from the imperial elite the power to deny him anointing at his burial. Preparation for the burial was a responsibility that Christians and other organizations assumed on behalf of the poor in the Roman Empire. In the early Christian tradition, it began to have an anti-imperial and revolutionary significance. Throughout the empire, there existed all kinds of institutions: ecclesia, quanon, synagogue, all organized around various cultic figures such as Isis or other Roman gods or goddesses. Also, labor associations and other aspects of life. One of the key the functions of the associations was ensuring the burial and memorializing of the members, almost taking on the role as mutual aid societies or insurance policies for those too poor to provide for their own burial. When individuals died, members of their association would ensure that they are buried, honored, and remembered in a liberational toast and a regular association meal, which was the early toast in which communion is derived from. While many associations in the Roman Empire honored Caesars and the gods of Rome, the early Christians honored a poor man executed as a criminal revolutionary. And this is where we're going to get into our service. This service of honoring the patron saints and martyrs of the liberation struggle. This is not merely a time for us to lift up names of those who have come before us, but to really reflect on the lives, the values, the struggles that those before us engaged in, and thinking about, as Olivia shared in the poem by Sonia Sanchez, how do we catch their fire? What fire do we then turn over to generations to come? How do we keep these values within our movement, especially when our movement is a movement of the minority, a movement now, as it was then, of the poor and dispossessed against an empire that chooses profits over our lives. And so when we're engaging in this service, just like we're engaging in movement, we have to think about, what does it really mean to believe and act upon the values, upon the principles that say that everyone has a right to live? And how do we, as those who want to be revolutionaries, honor those who have fallen victim to empire, a society run by those who make decisions, who organize society in a way that kills us, and then demands that we pay for our burial? and demands that we move on without grieving the lives as though they didn't matter. And so this service tonight is about lifting up those who have given their lives to struggle, whether they were killed directly by acts of police violence or other extreme forms of violence, or if they died by poverty in ways that are unseen, victims to those who didn't have access to health care. And so, to open up the reflections on these sacred texts, I'd like to invite Brittany Kewington of Common Defense, the Black Veterans Caucus that recently formed. Brittany Kewington is a U.S. Air Force veteran currently residing in her hometown of Dallas, Texas. Brittany serves as the social and climate justice advocate as it pertains to the union labor movement with the Communication Workers of America. With CWA, Brittany is the director for the Broadband Brigade for District 6, and CWA is Next Gen, developing young labor leaders. Brittany is also a proud mother and #1 advocate for her autistic son, Parker, age 6. Brittany, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. And I wanted to reflect and offer a name in remembrance of those who have passed on and contributed to helping us fight against the struggle that we are so deeply oppressed by and continue to be oppressed. And my offering is A. Philip Randolph. A. Philip Randolph was a labor leader and a civil rights activist who founded the nation's first major Black union, which was the Brotherhood of Soup and Cart Porters in 1925. And through his organizing efforts in the 1930s, he helped end racial discrimination in the defense industries and eventually led to the end of the segregation of the U.S. Armed Forces, which I'm very proud of as a veteran. The initial idea and the concept of the March on Washington, the first March on Washington, that didn't come to pass that year in 1941, was formulated by A. Philip Randolph. But he did become the principal organizer for the March on Washington that happened in 1963. And I am honored to be a member of the A. Philip Randolph Institute, which was created by his family after his transition with the intent on developing future Black labor and civil rights leaders. A. Philip Randolph understood the gravity of our shared struggles and the longevity of it. And the Institute was created to achieve full human rights. And that was something he believed wholeheartedly in.
Thank you so much, Brittany. I met Brittany just a few months ago. It has to be said, I feel like I've had the luxury of having this space with some of the people that have just become, just near and dear to me, and just great spirits. And Brittany is one of those leaders who I've met. This service itself, honoring the patron saints, is inspired in large part by Common Defense in their practice of honoring the patron saints, the revolutionary veterans of our movement, whether that be Harriet Tubman, whether that be Medgar Evers, who was killed and was a spark for the original March on Washington in 1963, Mr. B, Harry Belafonte, who passed recently. We lift up all of these folks with this service. And just for you all tuning in, whether you are in the Zoom, on Facebook, on YouTube, throughout the service, if you could lift up the names of people that you would like for us to highlight during the service, people that you would like to honor, folks that have passed on, but also, it's in the living. So people that you want to pray for. I'm going to next pass it on to Reverend Chad Collins. Pastor Chad Collins is from the Friends of Sabile North America. Chad is a husband, father, and lover of all God's people. honored to be a pastor of Valley View Presbyterian Church for 18 years and the national organizer for FOSNA, Friends of Sabile North America, since April of 2022. Thank you, Chad, so much for joining us.
Thank you, my sister, and thanks to all of you tonight for joining us in this holy gathering. As I begin, I just want to highlight the privilege that I've had to partner and work with so many, and now to include all of you in that. I want to share with you briefly a reflection on my time in Palestine in May, as Sister Sierra, Brother Niall, and Olivia were just there. And as many of you know, Brother Nelson Mandela is quoted by saying, "We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinian brothers and sisters." So I want to just share a reflection of one of my days there, and I hope perhaps you can find yourself in this journey with me. It was our very first day in the old city. We took a walk down a road leading from the Dung Gate through the streets of Silwan to the neighborhood of Batn al-Hawa, to the Madah Silwan Creative Center. I know this walk is familiar to a couple on the call tonight. But like many walks in Palestine, it's a difficult trip, physically and emotionally. Walking the steep hill down from the old city, then up the steep steps in to the Batn al-Hawa section of Silwan, we faced the dichotomy of one of the world's superpowers, oppressively wielding its might in its entirety by means of 24-hour surveillance, military patrols, settlers moving in, daily threats of home demolitions, upon a people with little or no worldly power, but whose very existence resists and challenges the evils put upon them. As we walked from the old city to Silwan, three intertwined images stayed with me, and I hope might resonate with all of you today. At the beginning of the walk, you witnessed the presence of the Israeli apartheid forces at work. You see the soldiers and the surveillance cameras all over, which serve as a reminder that the people of Silwan are always being watched by men and women with weapons of war. The people are not free in so very many ways, and they are being watched by their occupier 24/7. Secondly, as you make your way down the hill, you will begin to see in the distance, painted on the houses of Silwan, much like the eyes on the altar of our service tonight, murals of eyes of local and international leaders, activists, freedom fighters, martyrs. These eyes communicate to the people of the world, namely the empire, that Silwan sees them and that they should see Silwan too, and know that they are still there and that they're not going anywhere, and that their love for their land and their home will never end. Many of those eyes are from those murdered by police, military forces within Palestine and throughout the world. Some of those eyes are on our altar tonight. Yad al-Halak, a young autistic man murdered by the Israeli police on his way to school. George Floyd murdered by Derek Chauvin, who knelt on his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Others include Rachel Corey, an American student who was run over by an American-built bulldozer twice as she tried to prevent it from destroying the home of a Palestinian family. And others like Palestinian intellectual novelist, playwright Ghassan Kanafani, who was assassinated by Israel in July of 1972. It is powerful to stare into these eyes and know the stories of their lives and their deaths and their witness beyond death. As it is said, the eye is the doorway to the soul, and with these murals, Silwan is calling us all to see the souls of these beautiful children of God as they represent the struggle, the samud, or the steadfast resistance against Israeli apartheid and all forms of empire. The final image for me comes from the story of the 9th chapter, actually, of John's Gospel, when Jesus heals the man who was born blind. You might know this story. Jesus makes muddy paste with spit and dirt and puts it on the man's eyes and tells him to go and wash himself in the pool of Siloam. In Arabic, the pool of Silwan. That's right. A little further down our walk, we come to the pool of Silwan. To me, the significance of these images is wrapped up in what we see and what it does to us. Do you see what I see? First, we see the worldly power, which constantly threatens the lives of the innocent and the indigenous. I'm sad, so sad and discouraged when I see this. Second, we see the creativity and beauty of a people seemingly without any power, calling the eyes of its oppressor to see deep within their souls. I'm challenged and inspired and brought to the fire when I see this. Thirdly, we see a pool where a man blind from birth, without any power at all, receives his sight. And when I see this pool, I'm encouraged to believe that what seems impossible on the outside is in fact possible. I see that though Israel holds all the worldly power in its hands, the people of Silwan, the people of Palestine, know and live their lives with a power that can never be snuffed out. Like Sister Sonia's call to us, the people of Silwan have caught their fire to live. And no empire, no worldly power can ever snuff their fire out. May we be like them. And like Jesus, whose blood was poured out as libation for freedom and healing. Today, we remember and honor those named and unnamed sisters and brothers whose blood was poured out as libation to feed and nourish us and all the peoples fighting for freedom and liberation. Their lives and their deaths, their blood libation is what fuels our fire. The fire within us to live, to love, and to fight for freedom until it comes everywhere for everyone. Let us always remember our sisters and brothers who have laid the foundation for us, that we might bear the flame until freedom comes. Amen.
Amen and Ashe. I don't pass out the title of brother easily, but Reverend Chad, you definitely get that. Thank you. That was powerful. I see in the chat folks are lifting up. We have Linnell honoring Fannie Lou Hamer, Mary Quickly Stokes, Mary Knight, Gon Herman of Durham, North Carolina, lifting up Chris Hani of the Liberation Struggle of South Africa, Patrice Lumumba of the Congo, and Janani Luam of Uganda, all martyrs for justice. Thank you all. Wow. And shout out to Nora and Carlos. Love y'all. I'm now going to, before we pass it off to Mr. Cortland Cox of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Yes, I said that. This is so exciting. But before Mr. Cox, sort of takes the reign, Tony, if you could pull up this piece, this song, Ella's song, that was written and originally performed by Sweet Honey and the Rock, Bernice Johnson Reagan, who we often invoke in these spaces. This is being performed by folks on our network because, how copyright infringement, but we have beautiful singers, Sharon and Keisha, who are performing Ella's song. Thank you.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes, until the killing
Thank you so much, Tony. Thank you to Sharon and Keisha Solil for that beautiful rendition of Ella's song, We Who Believe in Freedom. I am now going to pass it off to Cortland Cox, who served on the executive committee of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC. He served as the SNCC representative on the steering committee for the historic 1963 March on Washington and helped organize the 1964 Freedom Summer in Mississippi. Mr. Cox was one of the organizers of the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, LCFO, where the Panthers come from, for the Black Panther Party, established in 1965 in Lowndes County, Alabama, which only had 4 registered African American voters despite being 80% Black. The LFCO's work enabled Black residents to take control of the local government within 4 years. In the 1970s, Mr. Cox served as the Secretary General of the 6th Pan-African Congress in Tanzania, as well as on the board of Trans-Africa, which advocated for the end of South African apartheid. In the more recent decades, Mr. Cox has served in a variety of local and federal government positions, including being appointed by Mr. Bill Clinton to serve as the Director of Minority Business Development Agency, the MBDA, at the U.S. Department of Commerce. He currently serves as the board chair of the SNCC Legacy Project. And I'm also happy to say that Mr. Cox is still in the struggle. Whenever you need him, he is there and has been a comrade, a dear comrade to the Dream Defenders. So thank you so much for your work.
Yeah, thank you, Sierra. Today, I really want to talk a bit about Miss Ella Baker, because she was born in 1903. And for a Black woman at that time, responsibilities were very limited. But she went on to become the National Field Secretary for the NAACP and was also the Executive Director in 1960 for the SNCC, for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And when the sit-ins broke out in 1960, she received $800 from Martin Luther King to create a meeting of students who were engaged in the sit-ins across the country. And the one thing that she did advise us is, do not become the student group to the SNCC, to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Be your own. Create your own space. You have more energy. You have more time, and you have more ideas to engage in the struggle. But when I think about Miss Baker, what she gave us and what was important to the things that she gave us, there were 2 things, but the first one I want to talk about first. And the first is what we just heard, the song that we just heard. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. And, someone who's been engaged in the struggle for some 63 years, that is not only a statement, it's my catechism. It is the central belief that allowed, John Lewis and Diane Nash to face the terror of the freedom rides. It is the same kind of concept and catechism that I'm assuming Harriet Tubman, who said, we who believe in freedom cannot rest, or Frederick Douglass, who said, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. And I hope the young people of today saying, we who believe in freedom cannot rest, because it is on that principle that we can engage in many, many actions, whether we're talking about the March on Washington, whether we're talking about, the march from Selma to Montgomery, whether we're talking about voter registration, whether we're talking about feeding the hungry, whether we're talking about clothing those who are naked, whatever we are talking about, if we have a fundamental belief that we who believe in freedom cannot rest, we will continue the action, even at times when things that we think are necessary, we know will not be sufficient. So I have engaged over the past 63 years in a number of things. I've known a number of people, including people who were just A. Philip Randolph. I knew Martin Luther King. I knew John Lewis, Bayard Rustin, all these people. But the fundamental thing with all of them is that they continued the long struggle because they had in their minds and their concept, the catechism, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. And I hope that is, if I have one thing to say to the next generations, that is the same thing that I would say to them. What Ms. Baker said to us, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cox. Yes, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. I next want to pass it over again to Reverend Niall Fort of the Dream Defenders Sunday service for the prayers for the people.
Thank you, Sierra, and thank you, Cortland Cox. I don't know if I've ever heard someone be so deep and rich in their comments in such a short amount of time. So I think you have another career in teaching preachers how to be brief, but I'm gonna just throw that out there because that was inspiring. It takes me longer just to say how my day went. So we really just got a treat, and I really appreciate it. That was amazing. I actually want to read briefly a passage from Toni Morrison's magisterial novel called Beloved. There's this little scene in the text where this 70-year-old, unchurched, as Toni Morrison writes, preacher and grandmother goes out into the clearing in the fields. And she essentially preaches a sermon, but another way to hear it is she says a prayer. So I'm going to go ahead and lift up her words, and we'll move to the end of the program. Here she said, in this here place we flesh that weeps, laughs, flesh that dances on bare feet in the grass. Love it hard. Yonder they do not love your flesh. They despise it. They don't love your eyes. They just as soon pick them out. No more do they love the skin on your back. Yonder they flay it. And oh, my people, they do not love your hands. Those they only use to tie, bind, chop off, and leave empty. Love your hands. Love them. Raise them up and kiss them. Touch others with them. Pat them together and stroke them on your face, because they don't love that either. You gotta love it. You. And no, they ain't in love with your mouth. Yonder out there, they will see it broken and break it again. What you say out of it, they will not heed. What you scream from it, they do not hear. What you put in to nourish your body, they will snatch away and give you livings instead. No, they don't love your mouth. You gotta love it. This is flesh I'm talking about here. Flesh that needs to be loved, feet that need to rest and to dance, backs that need support, shoulders that need arms, strong arms. And I'm telling you, and oh, my people out yonder, hear me. They do not love your neck unnoosed and straight. So love your neck. Put a hand on it, grace it, stroke it, and hold it up. And all your inside parts, they just as soon slop for hogs. You gotta love them. The dark, dark liver, love it, love it. And the beat and the beating heart, love that too. More than eyes or feet, more than lungs that have yet to draw free air, more than your life-holding womb, in your life-giving private parts. Hear me now. Love your heart, for this is the prize. Toni Morrison, Beloved. Sierra, I'm gonna ask you to help me out here and how to wrap up the prayer portion, but I wanted to go ahead and share that in the spirit of Toni Morrison.
Well, that was a word and then some. Um, whew. This service is deep, y'all. So if you feel like you need to rest or take some time after to reflect, I recommend that you all do so. Reverend Nile actually took me to a friends meeting of the Quakers this morning and for a walk in the park, which was something that I didn't know that I needed, but I did. And, as we reflect on the revolutionary act of loving people, of grieving people, of lifting them up, I want to bring some people into the space that folks have mentioned. Diana Freelon Foster shared the lives of children matter. I lift up the story of 10-year-old Quantavious Eason, who was victimized by the Senatoba, Missouri Police Department, Mississippi Police Department a few days ago. This child was arrested for public urination, put into a police cell, taken to jail, arrested, detained. Uriel Frazier Trumpet lifted up Ida B. Wells, Billie Holiday, Paul Robeson, Shirley Chisholm. Olivia said to add Mother Morrison to the altar. Reverend Chad lifts up Rob Penny, August Wilson, Renell Lilly, Dennis Brutus. We also want to add to the fold the mother of our dear comrade, Lucy Fisher, the late mother of Tammy Rojas, an incredible organizer with Put People First, Pennsylvania. We had a leader from Put People First. Last week, Nijmi Zarinko share in our service. There's a GoFundMe for the services of Lucy Fisher. And I just have to say, as sorrowful or as grave as the service is, I have to say that there is a bit of anger within me that I have to share with you all. I was sharing with Reverend Nile earlier. My uncle passed on the same day as Lucy Fisher earlier this week. And just thinking about the indignity of death and the way in which our society wants us to move forward. And again, just how expensive it is to bury someone, to honor someone that you've loved. And, there's reflecting on the ills of this society and that the systems that lead to us to be able to be put in circumstances where we can't properly honor our people. But there's also this power that we have in unity and the coming together. And to, at least in this space, when I say the name Alfred Sidney Taylor Jr., who was a veteran, that if not anywhere else, that I know that, his spirit will be carried on with you all. And so I just want to lift that up for all of us and just appreciate folks coming together on this Sunday. I want to pass it off to my brother Chase Madkins from the Common Defense Black Veterans Caucus. Before I do so, I just have to shout out Zach White, who's on the call, who's an incredible leader with the Freedom Church team. Much love to you, Zach. And so Chase, if you feel ready, whatever it is you want to do, brother. Chase is an incredible organizer in Memphis, Tennessee, and has been engaging with the struggle there, particularly around police brutality and the housing struggle. And so, Chase, if you're ready.
Hey, thank you for Sierra for reaching out and extending this opportunity to me. I'm gonna try not to be long-winded, and I think I know what I want to share with the group. But before I do that, I just want to take a second and make light make bring some awareness of a current issue or situation that's playing out publicly now. That began with the struggle that I had with Memphis Police Department about a month and a half ago, almost 2 months ago. In which case I was arrested during a what we call a pretextual traffic stop, meaning that no crime had been committed, but the police saw something by way of a defect on my vehicle that they feel like granted them permission to like conduct the investigation. And so in this case, they perceived my driver's my license plate to be stolen, which as of August the 11th, which was my grandmother's birthday, would have been my grandmother's 92nd birthday. The case was dismissed, which would indicate that there was no evidence to suggest that my license plate was stolen to begin with. But the result was still arrest. My son was held by the Department of Children's Services unfairly, unjustly, and unethically. It took my son's mother about 4 hours to get him released from detention. So, needless to say, it was not only traumatic for me, as they but violently ripped me from my vehicle, but it was equally traumatic, if not more so, for my son who sat on the back seat the entire time. And so with that, I hold, a certain level of hostility or resentment or, just a lot of things, even down to like shame and guilt for not being in a position to protect my son in that moment. So the piece that I got for y'all today is a verse. I wrote it, ironically, I wrote it to Curtis Mayfield, Right On to the Darkness, which I believe was released in the 70s sometime. And so I wrote it to like a certain riff of that song, the beat. But I feel like it grounded me today, and what is, reminding me what's going on in the world around us and internally as well. So that's that. And I guess I'll just get to it. We are living in a time behind enemy lines. Seeking you will find divinity in these rhymes to infinity and beyond. Kings, queens, and pawns. Draw from your life purpose. Chase reading the Psalms. Royalty in my heart. Poetry in my art. I project my own success. I'm never missing the mark. They say that we the truth. I say we doing our part. I want to speak to the youth, but I don't know where to start. I guess they living in a time behind enemy lines. I just hope we find strength in my rhymes to stay focused. Notice how they hate to see you shine like a blood diamond dug straight out of the mines. Operation Enduring My Own Freedom. It's a war going on. Donald Trump is the leader. Can't join, so we beat them. Can't let them mislead you. It's elementary since they gave agendas to the teachers. And that's their piece, right?
Thank you, Chase. To close, for real, that was beautiful. And yeah, sending love to your family, Chase. I'm going to pass it over to Ricky to share the altar as it has been culminated throughout this service, and then sending you all love as we go into this next week.
Yes, sharing my screen one time. Thank you, everybody, for this amazing service. What I have so far, as I color everything out. Something I would think I would just let sit, let it speak for itself in some ways. Yeah, and to add to it, I want to also lift up some revolutionary artists that I pulled from in painting this and in designing this. Aaron Douglas, who is an amazing Afrofuturist revolutionary artist in the Harlem Renaissance, and Cuban revolutionary artist and screen printer Rene Mederos, whose amazing color schemes in rich reds, blues, and oranges I pulled from his amazing posters on revolutionary history during the Cuban Revolution. And yeah, this is what I have so far. And I think I will work more towards it and maybe send it via email or something really nice for people.
That'll be great, Ricky, and we'll be sure to get it out there. Thank you so much for everyone for joining. Thank you again for this team that helped hold this service together. Pauline, I see you in the mix, who's just like just an incredible leader, and we couldn't do this without you. And to all of you who have joined us tonight, whether it be on Zoom, on YouTube, on Facebook, if this is some sort of time matrix, timeline thing, and this is just the future, we're reporting from the past. We love you.